Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and distinguished audiences of all ages. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's presentation of the 8th Annual Oakville Film Festival and OFFA 2021. My name is Tyler Collins. I am the arts reporter for Oakville News and oakvillenews.org. You can read us for free online every day at oakvillenews.org. We are so grateful you are joining us tonight for our Saturday night primetime ticket. We had 3 fabulous short films along with the Canadian Screen Award-winning French Exit. We are so glad to be joined by an esteemed panel of some of the writers and directors of both the shorts and the feature you have just had the pleasure of seeing. I am joined at the table tonight by Executive Director of OFFA, Wendy Donnan, as always. Hi, Wendy.
Hi.
And in our production nook, as always, is the wonderful Tori Nixon. But tonight we have 4 special guests coming in from 4 different cities across Canada and the United States. First, from the short film The Plumber, we are joined from Los Angeles by the writer, director of photography, production designer, and costume designer, Cate Carson.
Hello, everyone.
Next, we are joined from San Diego, California, the producer, director, and writer of By Luna, Alexis Duran.
Hi, everyone.
From Vancouver, British Columbia, we are with the writer, director, and executive producer of The Tailor.
Hi.
Natalie Theriault. Oh my goodness, I'm sorry, forgot the name in the script. Natalie Theriault is with us this evening. And last, but certainly not least, from French Exit, we are so lucky to be joined by the author of the source novel and screenwriter of the film. From Portland, Oregon, we are joined tonight by Patrick DeWitt.
Hi, everybody.
Best of all, for this live Q&A tonight, we are joined by you, the audience. Because this is a live event, we would love to hear your questions, and we can ask them to our esteemed panel here tonight. If you have a question that you would like to ask any one person or everybody, all you have to do is type it into the chat function on the right-hand side of your screen, just right here. Type in your question and they'll be sent to us electronically, so either Wendy or I can ask them to anyone on the panel. Don't forget, too, that all the films that were screened this evening as part of your ticket are eligible for the Audience Choice Awards. And if you would like to vote for any of them, the rating scale is at the bottom of your screen here, where you can rate each title from 1 to 5 stars, and your votes will be tabulated to crown the Audience Choice Award winner at the end of the festival. The winners will be announced at our award show on Wednesday, July 7th in the evening. Now, without further ado, let's get to talking about the 4 terrific movies that we have just seen. First, let's go to the directors and writers of our 3 short films. Now, we were talking beforehand, and Alexis, you made By Luna in the fall of 2019, but Cate and Natalie, you made yours over the course of 2020 amidst the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. And one of the hot topics we've been talking about, what's the process of not just filming, creating, and designing a movie in the terms of the pandemic, but what was it like releasing the film to pandemic audiences as well? So this is a free form. Anybody who would like to go first, please feel free to just jump right in.
Well, this is my first film, so I would have liked to have been able to go in person and meet people and see the audience reaction. But we filmed before COVID hit, but all post-production was done during COVID.
What was it like making and releasing your first movie in terms of COVID-19? Because that it's so not traditional from how film is normally created and shared with the world.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I missed out on meeting the audience members and seeing their reaction to it. Like, I've never seen it in a theater. I've only seen my movie on a computer.
Cate, maybe you'd like to talk to us. How did it change the creation process? Because you've made movies both before and during. What was different about being on set during the times of COVID-19?
Well, the first thing was it took us longer in prep because we knew inevitably that when we were going to be filming in September of 2020, that we were going to be doing multiple roles, which is why I have all of those titles on this film in particular. And so the prep process was longer. And during filming, it was harder to communicate with the very few people that we did have on set. You know, at our heaviest, we had 9 for a couple of hours, but for the most part, we were working with just 7 crew members on that film. And it was a lofty goal because this is, you know, a period piece. We had a lot of lighting, we had a lot of, you know, set that needed to be done. So it was challenging, and I'm happy that we are not doing that anymore. But, you know, I'm super glad that we did it, and we did it safely. It was just more of a challenge than usual.
Now, Cate, did you film yours in California, in the Los Angeles area where you were? Because yours is a history drama, decidedly not set in California. It's set in 1940s Poland. So as a first-time production designer on your short, what was it like turning California into Warsaw?
We got very lucky because we were at 3 different locations. One of them was actually a burned house that we were able to rent for a big location in the film, to really settle into that war-torn area. And it was still usable because it had only burned, you know, surface-wise. So we were able to come across that. That was really wonderful to have. And then it was just about masking the rest of the locations and trying to configure them in a way that you weren't going to see those little seams, and really pulling in some of the other props. And we did a lot of hand distressing and, you know, creating a lot of things to be able to sell that world. So, you know, it was a lot of work, but also a lot of fun.
Now, Alexis, you created your film in the fall of 2019, but a lot of the distribution has been happening in the last year at events that are digital, where we're not physically with our audiences. How is sharing film different when we're doing it digitally like this and we don't get the presence of being in a theater with people?
Well, I mean, it's been actually somewhat nice because I've been part of a few Q&A panels, and I'm not sure if that would have been an opportunity if it was held in person. Usually it's a bit more selected and reserved for larger, longer form films. So I think that's a huge benefit for us as the filmmakers to be able to talk about our films and answer questions. So I'm really grateful for that. Yeah. And also just being able to invite people all around the world. I had friends from Thailand that were interested from Germany, and it was simple as just sending a link to them. Like, hey, it's a few dollars, here's a link. Hope you enjoy it and be a part of it. So that's been great.
What do you think is the most interesting location of someone who has seen your movies so far?
Probably Thailand. Yeah. I was there abroad for 6 months. I have a nice connection to friends from there, and a lot of them I still keep in touch with via Facebook and email. And a lot of them are really interested in just keeping in contact. So yeah, I would say Thailand.
Well, in terms of globetrotting and far-reaching, let's move on now to our feature of the evening, French Exit. Now, Patrick, you have written both several novels, and this isn't your first screenplay, but I think it's your first time adapting your own work for the screen. What's the difference talking to people when you finish writing a novel and when you finish making a movie? What's the same and what is different about talking to people as they see your work?
Well, I think that's a good question. It's a bit difficult if I could pinpoint really what the differences are. I think maybe readers have more specific questions related to language, and it's much more sort of niche in its way, whereas cinema is much more, I think, there's a lot of people who watch film casually. I think there's fewer people who read literature casually. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Obviously, there's people that are really hardcore cinephiles, and you come across some of those, but it seems like I'm coming across more people who are puzzled by the by the content of the film as opposed to the book, and I don't know what that necessarily means, but I feel like because there's like a star in the film, maybe some people were tricked into thinking it would be something that it doesn't really necessarily deliver on. I don't know. I've been getting, the response has been a bit mixed, I guess is what I'm saying, which was true for the book as well, but it seems a bit more pronounced. Some people who maybe were expecting something a little bit more palatable or easier to digest or more sensible. I've met a couple people who are a little bit peeved with me, more so with the film than the book.
What's it like having people who are peeved with you?
It's fine. It's not a problem for me.
Well, this kind of leads into my next question, which is also coming from the audience. We have Charlotte C., who's asking about what it's like for you as an author. What do you make of your your books being made into movies and then suddenly being translated from the page to the screen?
Yeah.
What's that experience like for you, seeing it go from written word to a three-dimensional environment on camera?
It's not one thing, the experience, it's varied. So sometimes it's really, I guess the main thing that takes getting used to, and which perhaps I'll never get fully used to if I continue to work and adapting my work, is I hear the book, by the time you finish writing a novel, you've essentially memorized it and you can hear it. Every line is delivered just so, even the narrative voice is very particular. And that is not translated to the screen. And it's not to say that the translation to the screen, there's not like a diminishment of quality or it's not even problematic. It's just other than how I hear it in my mind. And so there's always a phase of me getting used to actors and directors and costumers and all these people's interpretation of the book. And they're doing their job, and the people that I've been lucky enough to work with on French Exit I'm admiring of all their work. But there's this phase of sort of coming to recognize that the novel and the movie are really two different entities, and they don't necessarily have to match up. But then once you can settle into that reality, it takes me 3 or 4 viewings of a film, I think, before I can sort of watch it the way maybe a normal person would watch it. But once I get to that point, then I found with this film it to be really gratifying and lovely.
Now, I'm a big fan of both one of your earlier books and the first film of yours that was inspired by one of your books, The Sisters Brothers, which came out a few years ago with Jake Gyllenhaal and John C. Reilly. Now, a lot of people saw Sisters Brothers, but one of the main differences is you wrote the book, but you did not write the screenplay of the film, whereas on French Exit, you did both. So both mine and Charlotte's follow-up question, how different was it this time getting to write the screenplay too? Did it change that voice you were just talking about?
Yeah, I think it made it a little bit more approachable, I suppose. I admired the Sisters Brothers film so much. I'm a huge fan of Jacques Audiard, the director, and of course all the actors were so wonderful. But I think there was a certain distance for me, and I felt closer to this film, I suppose. It was more hands-on. And my relationship to the director, Azazel, is very close. He and I are dear friends, and we're chatting all the time anyway. So for us to collaborate felt, I suppose, simpler, less complicated. And my comfort level with him is very high. So I think it was a more passive role for me with the Sisters Brothers. And it felt nice to be a little bit more hands-on with this film.
Well, tonight now, I think we have a unique opportunity to talk about writing at large, because it's not often that we have every member of our panel familiar in the same discipline, where all 4 of you wrote the words that went into your films. So this is kind of a question for everybody. Talk to me about what is the great challenge for you personally as a writer? And if there was a writer watching this now, either for the screen or for a book, what would you tell them as they are continuing to learn their craft? And if anyone wants to speak on this, we would love to hear eventually from all 4 of you, but there's no order for whoever would like to speak first, second, third, seventh, any number like that.
That was it. Could we just hear the first part of that question one more time? It was a bit large for me.
Sure. What is the thing you would say to a new writer as they continue to learn their craft? What would you tell them as they're continuing to work, whether for film or for a book?
I'll just speak from the point of view of the book guy, because I'm the book guy in the panel. But when I do meet young writers, I tend to just point out something that was a little bit elusive to me, which is obviously you should read variously, read as much as you can read, but you should be seeking the authors who are writing for you in particular. I sort of lost a few years reading work that was commendable and readable and that I enjoyed, but I could see that it wasn't necessarily straight up my street, you know? And then I happened across the authors who were, and reading those authors, those men and women really closely inspired me in a much more concentrated way than the sort of more general reading did.
For me, if I had my choice on every project, I would actually either co-write or work with a writer, because I really like that part of the collaboration process. It brings a new idea to the table, one that may not have existed in my brain. And as the director, I'm already involved in so many other departments. So I really do value that experience. On this particular one, I was the sole writer on it. And I don't think I have so much advice on that end, other than if you are also a director, don't feel like you have to write everything you do. I think there's a lot of pressure put on directors coming up right now to also be these amazing writers, and not everybody has that skill set. And so for me, if you know, like, directing is your lane and you're okay at writing, try to seek out people who are really well versed in that and that can bring something else to the table. That would be my advice.
Just to add to what Cate said, I'm glad you said that, because there's this 2-minute clip on YouTube of Spike Lee saying, if you look at every first-time director, you know, he or she most likely wrote the first feature, which is somewhat true. But I'm glad you said that, Cate, because I feel like I'm an okay writer. I prefer directing, and I do enjoy the writing that I'm doing, but I look forward to directing other people's writing. And I love reading other people's screenplays. So I hope that I can balance a career where occasionally I'll write something that's for myself, and then maybe with a partner, and then hopefully someone else's material. So I'm glad you said that.
This is the first thing I ever wrote. So I was actually an actor and got stage fright and decided to go into writing. So it wasn't clear to me at all. It was like opening a present or something. I had to do 22 drafts, and I just kept writing and writing, and it kept getting clearer and clearer and clearer until the story was there. So the idea wasn't all clear at the beginning.
Natalie, did the stage fright, are you no longer acting because of that experience?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah.
You know, me personally, as a visual presenter, right? I've hosted events for OFFA over the last 2 years. And I host a local show as well with Film.ca Cinemas Presents, which is available to you fine members of the audience as well. And I can tell you, I've been either presenting or performing in front of people for more than 20 years. And I still get stage fright every single time I'm going in front of people. Even just before tonight, I have to warm myself up for a few minutes before I log on to see. So I don't think that's anything to shy from. But thank you for sharing that experience with us, Natalie. One thing you were mentioning, though, talking about the conception of ideas, I'd love to build on this, because all of you, as creators, can you spend each just 30 seconds even telling what the beginning of the idea for your movie was? Where did it come from, and what made this idea stick to you, and how did you turn it into the stories they became? Or to be more clear, what was the beginning of your ideas behind your movie?
You know, for me, the genesis at the time, I was dating someone who has a daughter, and she was trying to teach her to speak Spanish, and I'm bilingual, so I would chime in and help her out. But because of the political climate, and then in San Diego being so close to the border, for the first time when I was out in public with my then partner and her daughter, and I would try and help her to get her excited, enthusiastic about speaking Spanish, I felt nervous about speaking Spanish out in public for the very first time. And I've lived in San Diego my whole life, and I didn't like having that feeling. I wanted to avoid a confrontation, a conflict, any tension with the potential, other citizen nearby. And that's where that idea came from for my film.
I was at a party, and in the apartment building, there was a tailor shop at the bottom of it. And somebody, a guest at the party, was saying that they think that they were the last client to go to that tailor shop, because the tailor was in his 90s at the time. And I just couldn't get this elderly tailor out of my head.
For me, I have a sort of fascination with unsung historical heroes, kind of the everyday people that have gone under the radar. And I came across the story of Irina Sendler, who is not as unsung as others. I mean, she was up for the Nobel Peace Prize and lost to Al Gore, a few years back. But it was her and her network that actually rescued over 2,500 children out of Warsaw during World War II. And I had come across that initial story and said, well, I think we have seen a lot of the bigger scope stories. This is World War II, and this is, a grander view of it. And I wanted to do a very, very small one, a day in the life of one of these everyday heroes that kind of has to go into this place day in and day out and risk their life over and again, and really do it in my own style, because I think that could have been tonally done very differently as well. So, it was a fun challenge to do that, but that's where my story originated.
The story obviously the film started with the book, and the book began with just a bit of dialogue. I didn't know what the story necessarily I wasn't sure what it was, and I tend not to map things out. But I had an inkling of an idea who the protagonist would be. Her name's Frances Price, and I had a sense of her personality before I sat down with her. But then the first day, and this very rarely happens, I wrote the first day I worked on the book, I wrote the first scene of the book, more or less as it was published. And again, that's not the norm, but it felt sort of lucky in a way, and I decided to just continue on following the feeling of how it felt to spend time with and get to know the Price family. The adaptation's another story, but the book began just with these two people leaving a party that they were unhappy to be in attendance.
We have another question from the audience asking you, Patrick, how long did you work on the book for French Exit? And then how long did it take to write the screenplay?
They each took about a year. And again, book, a year's not very long for a book for me. I'm working on a book now I think I'm coming into year 3, and I just had to tell my publishers I'm going to be late. So it was just it's a short book, and it's quite chatty, and dialogue tends to go quickly for me, so it wasn't that long to work on it. The screenplay, I was sending all my drafts to Azazel, the director, and I overwrote it, as is usually the case for me in terms of adapting, knowing that we would cut away, but then it became sort of the question of what to cut and what to keep, and what the cuts meant, and all that sort of stuff. And that involved going back and forth. And I went to New York City to work with Aza on it. And it's more, the writing of the book was more sort of, I just sat down and did it, but I was alone, and I wasn't showing it to anyone until it was finished. But with Aza there, it became much more collaborative, which was excellent in that I think it did strengthen the script. And I'm a bit of a charlatan in terms of screenwriting, I just sort of am winging it. I never necessarily studied it. So Aza's there to sort of help me when I make mistakes and steer me away from my shabby inclinations. And but it took about a year for both. So 2 years altogether.
As we're talking about your work on the screenplay, Stacy Sinclair Zachary would like to know, she's a fan of your other film, Terry, which is just an original screenplay and not based on a book. Are you interested in writing another screenplay that's not based on a novel?
Yeah, that actually was based on fiction of mine that I never put out. I showed some work to Azazel, and then at the same time I was sort of recognizing that I didn't think that it was, I guess, good enough to publish. There was a part of the larger story that he admired, which was the story of the kid named Terry, and he thought there was a film in it. So that was the beginning of my working in film. It's all Aza's fault. I would love to write. I actually have a couple of ideas that I think should be scripts rather than short fiction or long form fiction. So the answer is yes. I have a couple of ideas for screenplays.
Now, we're lucky to be joined in the audience tonight by several members from some local book clubs. And one of the common questions I'm seeing here, can you tell us about your decision to change the ending of the movie from the ending of the book?
Okay, panelists, you have to do earmuffs because I'm going to spoil.
Oh,
Anyway, the people on the panel haven't seen the film yet, so.
right.
So it is different. The ending of the film was something that we went over and over on, and it was, you guys don't really have to cover your ears. You know, I mean, just to put it bluntly, it's sort of the protagonist commits suicide in the book, and there's a question of did she in the film, and I don't know if I'm supposed to say this or I don't want to steer anyone's opinion, but to me, she also kills herself in the film. It's just handled in a way that's much more discreet, I guess is the word. So it's, I don't think any of us wanted to see necessarily the actual act. And in adapting, you know, literature to screenplay, something that I have to sort of constantly remember is that all these things which look and sound good in the book don't necessarily translate into the visual medium. There's such a thing as too much visual information, of course. And I just didn't want to put something out into the world with those visuals of the book reenacted in the film. It was a decision that I think Oz and I both felt strongly about. It's just not what we wanted to do. But I think that ultimately it's similar in that Malcolm is alone at the end of the book. There's room in his life now for him to be an unencumbered young man in love. So yeah, I continually hear about the difference, or I've heard many times about the difference between the two, and I recognize that it's handled differently, but to me the emotional information is if not identical, then close enough.
I think your instinct to keep it away from the visual medium because of the power, I think it's a very brave and effective choice. But thank you for sharing that with us. If you are still not listening because you don't want it spoiled, you can listen again. We're good.
Listen, yeah.
We're not going to talk about that spoiler ending. Next from our audience, we have an unnamed member. Was there someone who inspired the character of Frances Price, or was she an original creation?
I have known people somewhat like Frances Price. I will not name them, but I think more than anything, when I wrote that book, I was under the influence, and I'm still under the influence of a sort of school of authors, and these are mid-century British female authors, Barbara Pym and Barbara Commons, and on and on, Muriel Spark, Elizabeth Taylor, the author, not the actor, Ivy Compton Burnett. These are all people who to me excel. Nancy Mitford, I'm reading right now, I love so much. It's a sort of a school of just brilliant individuals that flourished in England and in Ireland in the 1950s, 60s. And so I had Frances Price, it could be lifted from one of these books. And I was just sort of infected by the world created by these authors, and I just ran with it. I'm one who never really shied from influence. I think a lot of people, or some people, live in fear of their influence showing or something like this, but I really celebrate it, and I'm a big fan of some of my favorite books are very clearly influenced by other books. Do you know what I'm saying? It's sort of like, yeah. I love takes, when people have takes on something that's already there. The idea of communicating through time with deceased artists is always fun for me. So yeah, I just jumped right into it, thinking of these women who've been such a joy to spend time with.
Well, we're almost out of time for tonight, but I'd like to ask one more question to everybody. Because as we began talking about, sharing film is different this year, as it has been for the last year and a half. So I'd like, in one or two sentences from each of you, what has been the most gratifying thing about seeing your work fully realized and finished? What, to you personally, what is your favorite part of seeing the final product? Here, we'll just go clockwise. Natalie.
I'm just happy I finished it. That was the happiest part of it. Yeah, I did it.
Cate.
For me, it was really the first time that I got to make something that was entirely my own, and it wasn't for a contest or wasn't for a grant program or somebody else's idea. So that was the most gratifying thing for me.
Patrick?
I guess I hadn't seen the film in a proper theater with an audience of strangers until about 2 weeks ago. And that was in outdoors in a forest outside of Berlin, which was surreal in and of itself. But then to sit with these people and just to hear their reaction to it, I mean, it's such an obvious thing, but I didn't really recognize that it had been withheld from me. And then to experience it in the audience was really generous, and it was a lovely location and everything like that. So that was very moving.
And lastly, last but certainly not least, Alexis.
You know, I have to agree with Natalie. There is, I think, during production, it's so much fun. It can be stressful. There's a sense of relief when it's complete, but the best part, the most gratifying part, is I think being able to share it with people. And on top of that, when you receive feedback, aside from those few that just say, this is amazing, great job, the ones that really go into it and go beneath the surface and they will question you, ask you questions, express something that happened to them similarly, that's the best, when people really connect with you and they add to the dialogue. And that's quite powerful and gratifying. And I think out of 30 people that I shared this film with directly at that time, I think 5 really invested their time with me in having a dialogue, and that was the best part.
Well, thank you so much, all of you, for joining us tonight. This has been a real treat to have a conversation with you all, and thank you also for sharing your films with us and the local Oakville and Halton and Canada-wide audiences. Before we go, I have one more burning curious question myself. Patrick, I've noticed there is a tattoo on the inside of the palm of your hand. Could you share with us what is that?
It says thank you. You see it?
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Sorry, actually, it's tilted so we can see your wrist on that shot.
Oh yeah, sorry. Let me look at the.
No
I can't
trouble.
see. Oh, here we go. It says thank you. It says.
That's beautiful.
Is
And
it?
no better words to end tonight. Indeed.
The folly of youth. Don't get tattoos, kids.
Well, thank you, all 4 of you. And ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished audiences, please help me in thanking Cate, Natalie, Patrick, and Alexis for joining us tonight. We have been so delighted to have you here speaking with us. And thank you, the audience, for joining us for tonight's primetime ticket of OFFA 2021. We're so glad you decided to spend your time with us this evening. Now, tonight, we're not done yet. We have one more late night screening coming late this evening at 10 o'clock, starting in about 5 minutes. We have got Meander, which is our first ever late night horror show, and there are 2 shorts paired with that. And then tomorrow, Sunday, is Multiculturalism Day. We have 4 more features on the schedule for you. Those tickets are available, as well as full passes for the whole festival at www.offa.ca. On behalf of myself, Wendy Donnan, our executive director, and we are so grateful as well, Tori, that we have in the production. Always a pleasure to have her helping us behind the scenes. Stay safe. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you'll join us for more events at OFFA this year. Have a great night, everybody.
Bye.
Hi, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.